writers, you're listening to the Kobo Writing Life podcast, where we bring you insights and inspiration for growing your self-publishing business. I'm Stephanie, your host, and the Publisher Operations Specialist here at Kobo Writing Life.
I'm Joni, and I work on the business team of Kobo Writing Life. On today's podcast episode, we spoke to Melissa Yee, who is not only an indie author, but she's also the doctor in an emergency room.
So she talked to us a bit about her series, the Hope Sees Medical Mysteries series, where she talks about her experience in the ER and how that shaped her writing. And we also have an exclusive sample of her series, an audiobook that's becoming a Kobo original that's releasing this week. So the sample that you're about to listen to is called Code Blues, and it's the first book in that series. So yeah, we hope you enjoy the interview. We talk about a lot of Canadian content, surprisingly. So yeah, please keep listening.
And stay tuned to the end for an exclusive offer on her latest ebook.
I pictured the city of Montreal as a woman with bleached blonde hair and a generous, lopsided bosom who would draw me into her perfumed embrace and whisper, "Bienvenue." Instead, I found a skinny brunette with a cigarette jammed in the corner of her mouth who turned around and bitch-slapped me. At least that's what it felt like, even before I got mixed up with murder. Last night, it took me 7 hours to drive here from London, Ontario. When I hit the Quebec border, I could hardly make out the blue and white sign declaring bonjour and the fleur-de-lis flag fluttering against the dusky gray indigo June sky. But I noticed that my Ford Focus began bouncing over more frequent potholes. Although the maximum speed was still 100 kilometers per hour, there was also a minimum speed, 60. I decided that the roads were natural speed bumps. Everyone slowed down to about 110. Not me. I cranked up the On the Rocks cover of Lady Gaga, gave my cinnamon gum an extra hard chew, and zipped by them. Only to pull up at a dead stop at a red light. One of many in two little towns, Dorion and Ile-Perrot. I thought these must be the suburbs of Montreal, but no. Some planning committee thought it was a good idea to run Highway 20 through the heart of little burgs, advertising musculation and renovation. I knew the second one, but the first was intriguing. I could use a guy with some musculation. I crossed the bridge over to the island of Montreal. Strange to say, as a girl from nearby Ottawa, but I hadn't realized Montreal was an island, or how big a city it was, with the billboards lining the Ville-Marie Expressway, advertising everything from Cuba, to cell phones. Skyscrapers loomed above me, including one topped by a white searchlight that revolved around the city. By the time I took a left up the steep hill of University Avenue, it was after 8 p.m. I felt very small and tired, but at least I'd arrived. I cashed in the last of my good karma by finding a parking space, avoiding the $20 parking lot at the top of the hill. It would all be strawberry daiquiris and whipped cream from here. Except that the next morning, my alarm didn't go off. Like the White Rabbit, I was very, very late. I didn't panic. Being late was a habit of mine. Even though I was now a doctor, or at least a resident doctor, I often spared a moment to brush my teeth or dab on some lip gloss. Then suddenly there was no time. I was hopping around, pulling up my socks after barely yanking on my underwear. Today I was late for my first day of orientation at St. Joseph's Hospital in Montreal.
Thank you, Melissa, for joining us on the podcast today.
Thank you so much for having me.
And so before we get into it, can you just tell our listeners a bit about yourself?
Hi, everybody. My name is Melissa Yee. It's a pseudonym, though. My real name is Melissa Ewan-Innes. I'm an emergency physician, and I write medical thrillers, fantasy and science fiction, romance, and just about anything that catches my fancy.
Nice. So I want to learn more about how you started writing since you are a doctor, and I don't know how you managed to juggle the two. So how did you start writing?
I always wanted to be a writer. So honestly, if I'd had the guts, I would have just jumped right in and been like, this is me, I'm a writer. But I always wanted to play it a bit safe and know that I could support myself financially. And I really liked working with people. I didn't want to be stuck in a room all by myself 24/7. So I thought, why don't I just become a doctor, and then I'll have stuff to write about, and I'll keep a roof over my head, and I can still write, which is true as long as you have the energy.
How much time do you have? What are the hours like as an ER doctor?
To be a full-time emergency doctor, you would usually work 12 to 15 shifts a month, and each shift is usually 8 hours, and that would be the normal path. But for me, when I came out, I did make the decision that I wasn't going to work full-time because I wanted to have time to write. I had spent all, my youth basically in med school and residency, and I wanted to have some time to myself, which was really a tough decision. Like, I remember standing with my husband, we had just bought a house, and I was like, this sounds crazy because, you have to pay to go to medical school. I had to pay tuition when I was in residency. And then now I'm finally free. I can work more hours and I can make money for myself instead of just working for the hospital all the time. But I want some time to myself. Do you think that's stupid?
No.
He said, no, I think you're smart. You worked hard so that you don't have to work as much now and you can make your own decisions. So I was lucky that I found a guy who always kind of supported me and said, you do what you want and who cares about the rest of the world, which is part of the reason that I fell in love with him, really. And that's what I did. So I work part-time, and starting in 2019, I cut it down further because I don't know if you guys have followed the financial independence retire early movement, but I'm a big proponent of it. And that's what I think is ideal, is for you to, for me anyway, I wanted to work hard, save my money, and invest the difference, and then have the freedom to decide how much I want to work. So I still enjoy medicine, I still do it, but I don't feel like I have to be there all the time.
It's a good balance.
Yeah. So you've really been writing right from the beginning of your career then?
Yeah, I mean, I've been writing. I was one of the winners for Writers of the Future. So that's a fantasy and science fiction contest worldwide. And I won that in my last year of medical school.
It's amazing. I'm so impressed by this.
Oh, thank you. Well, but I had applied a few times, and then I had gotten mad that I hadn't been a finalist or anything, so I stopped applying, which was the stupidest thing to do because they don't care whether you apply or not. And then I put my skin song in, and I did win that one. And it is a really good opportunity because they'll fly you down to Los Angeles for a week of writing workshops and then do a big gala and invite a lot of science fiction and fantasy luminaries to come and celebrate the anthology of everybody's work. So the only thing that you would have to reconcile yourself with is that it is funded by the estate of L. Ron Hubbard. So it's from the money comes from Scientology.
Oh.
Yeah. So you have to decide if you're okay with that. And if you are, which I decided I was okay with because I thought the money should at least go to working writers and illustrators, then you accept that. And if you don't, then there are other contests that you can enter. But this is the only one I know of where they would fly you down and put you up and give you a writing workshop and all that kind of stuff. They have more money than most people.
Are they Scientology focused in any way, or were they valuable to you, the workshops that they did?
Oh yeah, well, you don't go to Scientology workshops. It's run by like Tim Powers and in my case, Algis Boudreaux, who has since passed away. But you get it's really based on writing. And the only thing that with L. Ron Hubbard is that they've printed up these giant things like you get a book on him and all this stuff, like a booklet at least saying, oh, he did these wonderful things with his writing and you might want to try these tactics too. Okay. But it's really based on whoever's your teacher.
Okay. And you really write across all genres, right? Because you don't write sci-fi anymore, is that correct?
I do still write fantasy and science fiction, but more in short fiction, although I do have some novels there too. But recently, because of time and energy constraints, I have concentrated more on my medical thrillers. And so I have the Hope C medical thrillers, and those are my most popular fiction, period. So if you like to be popular and read, then you kind of go with what people like, and that's what they like. Because, I really like Hope too. She's a resident who solves crimes. And I started writing her right after my residency and fellowship. So I feel like she is me, just still a resident and having to confront murderers, which is fun in its own way.
That's pretty cool. Did you always know that you wanted to publish independently?
Did I always know? No. I did submit to New York and all that sort of thing. But Hope was a little of a tough sell. Like, I'm not sure what exactly, but I do know that, so in the first book, there's a fair amount of romance and there's a love triangle. Mm-hmm. So for one publisher, that was a holdback because they thought, I'd like to see more mystery or more thriller aspect to it and not as much the personal relationships. which actually, interestingly enough, from books 4 to 7, that is the case, just because in book 4, which is Stockholm Syndrome, it's a hostage taking on the obstetrics ward, and she has PTSD afterwards. So all those books afterwards are very tightly paced, and they're all page turners. But up until then, she's more innocent, and, you know, like I say in the blurb, like, she really wanted to just pass family medicine, go on a date sometimes in the next 2 years, eat pain au chocolat. Like, she really wanted to just enjoy residence in Montreal, and she didn't expect to have to solve murderers. So she's much more innocent at the time. And I guess it's not a cozy, it's not a thriller, so they weren't sure what to do with it. And actually what happened was that I was having trouble, like, you know, so I have so many books that I'm like, they're all my babies, but some of them are more my babies than others. Mm-hmm. And when I did some research, Source Books actually had put up an infographic showing what its sales were. And a huge chunk of its sales were nonfiction. So I started researching that, and I was like, oh, I see. People are more likely, the readers are more likely to take a chance on nonfiction from people they don't know because they're interested in the subject and they're not as worried about if they're going to enjoy the experience with an unknown author. So let me try that. I have a bunch of essays that I wrote for the Medical Post. They're already written, they're already edited. Mm-hmm. I'm going to put that together in a collection called The Most Unfeeling Doctor in the World and Other True Tales from the Emergency Room, and see what happens. And that was a bestseller on Amazon.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah, it has a cool cover with a purse with skeleton hands on it and everything, and that, which was, again, very different, but in a good way that people responded to. They're like, okay, like, you know, there were other bios, like, by medical people, but this was clearly different. And then they wanted to see who was the most unfeeling doctor in the world. So, so they bought that. And after that went through, I realized, wow, independent publishing means removing the gatekeepers. And that can only be a good thing, because instead of people hemming and hawing, saying, you don't fit, you're not right, I don't know if they'll connect with you, you just put it out there and say, let's see. Let the people decide. And so I found that really powerful. So then I started releasing the Hope books. But I still have other books, as I mentioned. Like, I have really a lot of material, or I did pre-kids anyway. So now I mainly concentrate on Hope and her adventures. And I was doing one nonfiction book a year, and then I've had to cut that back too. Because, by the way, I was hired by a travel company that I would write novels for them in exchange for travel.
What?
Yeah.
Cool. I didn't know that was a thing.
Yeah, no, it was like the first thing. So Narat Travel, NARAT, hired me to do a 5-book series. So this year I went to Ecuador and the Galapagos in February. And in May, I went to Egypt.
Oh, that sounds
amazing.
Yeah, I took a cruise down the Nile, and we went to the resort on the Red Sea, and just things that I never thought I would do.
Mm-hmm. So do you just write, like, reviews, basically, or?
No, it's a novel.
Oh,
a
okay.
novel for each place, yeah.
Oh, okay.
So the novels are set in that place?
Yes.
Very cool thing.
Yeah, didn't even know that was something that happens.
No, I know. Yeah, so that's exciting too. But also another reason why I took another step back from medicine, because I was like, wow, I can't be traveling the world and writing all these books and stuff like that.
I'm too busy right now.
Yeah, I'm like, sorry guys, got to do this other thing that I don't know if it'll ever come up again.
Mm-hmm. So I'm just wondering, what do you think has been the best thing that you've done for your self-publishing business? From
a business standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, now it's become a cliche, but you do have to have a solid book or else nothing else will work. Mm-hmm. And I have appreciated my partnership with Kobo because you guys are awesome. So I did a Going, Gone contest with you where people would try and solve a puzzle. Like they had to solve 3 different clues that were embedded within 3 different short stories. Mm-hmm. And for mine, those were 3 interlaced hope stories that formed a novella. Then they had a chance to win $5,000. So that was amazing. Now you're also going to be releasing the first 3 Hope books as audiobooks.
Yeah, you're doing a Kobo original with us, is that right?
Yes, that's right. Yeah, the first 3. So all 3 books are done and will be released at once, I believe, on November 5th.
So I guess you get a lot of content from your job, is that right? Do you take a lot of
Yes, for sure. So in a few different ways. Like, so for my latest one, Graveyard Shift, was directly inspired by one of the police officers who came in the night before he had stopped a robbery at the hospital.
Oh, wow.
of medications. So I was pretty stunned that, someone almost got away with stealing medical grade fentanyl, Versed, ketamine, it's just cleaning us out, basically, if he hadn't stopped them. So I contacted him afterwards, and I got his permission. It's Sergeant Scott Coulter. And I was like, is it okay if I tell this story? Because I didn't end up writing that story directly, but I did write about addiction and everything in the book. And he got the okay from his bosses. And he's actually going to come to the library book launch on November 12th.
Oh, cool.
Which is super awesome. And we're trying to coordinate too, he likes Batman. We don't know each other very well, but he's posted on social media and I've seen it. So I was like, what if I wear Superman and you wear Batman? And he was down with it. And then also, more seriously, one of the physicians was killed. I don't know if either of you have heard of it, but I was actually working one day when I saw a bunch of headlines. This was when I was searching for articles, so I didn't read them, but I knew that a neurosurgeon was somehow involved in a death, but I didn't look at it until later. And when I got home on Facebook, as I'm part of physician groups on Facebook, people were just heartbroken because Dr. Alana Frick, who is, a gifted family physician and a mother of 3 and a runner and a leader in the Ontario Medical Association, had been killed by her husband.
Oh.
So that was horrifying. And also, I didn't really understand at the time what was happening because people said it was him, but of course he hadn't been convicted or anything yet. However, this past summer he was convicted of second-degree murder, so that's all done. And when I went to the Canadian Women in Medicine conference, they were doing a fundraiser for Dr. Alana Frick, and they were like, could you donate your books? I had offered to donate my books. And I said, but I don't want to donate the crime ones because I don't want it to seem like crime is entertainment when it's so serious. So, I have the most unfeeling doctor in the world. I could donate that and stuff. And she said, no, I think you should donate your Hope C books. And it's okay, if you think that people won't find it disrespectful, I'm happy to. And it turned out that was the high bid of the night, was for the Hope C book. And I was like, no way. They had all the, other things like facials and whatever else, but people really wanted the books.
Oh, wow.
And that was very moving. And to know that the money was going to go to her family and everything was wonderful. So I said, well, if people don't find it disrespectful, then I'd like to donate. I'd like to dedicate Graveyard Shift to Dr. Alana Frick and donate some of the proceeds to her memory. And people seem to find that, a good thing to do. Mm-hmm. So some of the money will be going to a scholarship in her name at the University of Windsor.
I love that.
That's great.
And then the other thing that came out was, obviously we were talking about intimate partner violence when all this stuff came up, and how we've changed our practice because of this. And one of my colleagues posted an article showing that, it was about near strangulation. So, and it boils down to the fact that if a woman is almost strangled by her partner, he is much more likely to kill her later.
Okay.
But when I read through the article and looked at the statistics, it was American, and they were looking at the statistics for white women and Latino women and black women, and they ended up concluding that it was it was a huge risk factor. It'd be 12, 16 times for the other women, but for African American women, it was only a 4 to 5 times risk factor, because African American women were so much more likely to be killed, period. Their partners would kill them anyway. Their partners would abuse them. They were at just such a high-risk group. They were already 4 times higher risk of being killed. So I was horrified. I looked at that article, and then I said, I am sure this is happening in Canada, but with Indigenous women. Mm-hmm. So I started researching that, and didn't take long. Canada is one of the only countries in the world that collects statistics on near strangulation in particular. So this one global article was like, wow, in Canada, the rate of near strangulation went down, which was unusual in this 3-year period, except for Indigenous women, where it went up. And I was like, okay. So I was like, the money will be going to Dr. Frick, but also to Indigenous people, Indigenous women, because they're at such high risk. We really have to put our money where our mouth is. Mm-hmm. So I reached out to the Akwesasne Family Wellness Center, which is close to me, like it's about an hour away from me. I live pretty close to a reserve. And I said, would it be okay? Like, do you mind if I shared some of the proceeds with you? And they were fine with it. And I sent them a copy of the novel so they could vet it and see if they felt comfortable with it, because, not everybody would be comfortable with a crime novel. Mm-hmm. And I made it clear, I was like, there are no Indigenous women being brutalized in these pages and everything. That it's really about hope on a night shift. It's not to do with Dr. Frick or with Indigenous women for the most part. There is an Indigenous woman in it, but she's not killed or anything like that. So I showed it to them basically, and I said, can I help you medically too? And she said, yes, our naloxone kits are expired. And so you guys may or may not know that that's the antidote for fentanyl and other narcotics. And they like to have them on hand in case anybody who comes to the shelter overdose. And I said, oh, okay. And I wasn't sure what to do because at the hospital, I work at a hospital and they own the medication. It's not mine.
Yeah, you can't.
I can't just take it and give it away.
Yeah.
So I was like, but let me reach out to 2 pharmacists that I know and see what they can do. One of them said, in Ontario, you can just go and get free naloxone or Narcan from the pharmacy. And I was like, no, I didn't know that.
I did not know that either.
Right, it's not publicized. She was like, what? How do you not know this? And I was like, how would I know this? Like, if I need Narcan, I know where it is, but I don't walk around with it. And now I live and work in a small town, so there's not a big demand for it. Mm-hmm. She said that the one kit she had she was going to get me new ones because she wanted to have a longer expiry date. Mm-hmm. But you can even get it anonymously. You give your name as harm reduction, and it's free.
How does no one know this?
Yeah. I know it's not. It has the word has not gone out. So I said yes, I would like this, please. She did take my OHIP card, so I'm not sure how anonymous it ends up being. Like somewhere your name is in the system, probably. Mm-hmm. But I paid $0. I took that naloxone or Narcan and I brought it to Akwesasne. And they said, thank you so much. Yeah. They had also gotten the bottles with needles, was what the trainers had given them. And they didn't feel comfortable injecting people, right? They're not trained to do this. Mm-hmm. So this one was that you just put it up the nose and spray it like you'd spray Otraven or anything like that. Mm-hmm. And they were much more comfortable with that. And it wasn't expired. By doing this novel also made me make more connections in my community. So I find it's just really cool, that you can do things on the page and you can do things off the page to try and make the world a better place.
Yeah, I love that you're doing that with your books. Mm-hmm. It's another very cool thing that you probably maybe wouldn't have been able to do if you were published traditionally as well, to have that kind of be able to redirect the funds from your books to something that you care about.
Yeah, I guess you would just have to look at your royalty statements and then take, and then make a donation in kind, but God knows when you would get the money, like in 6 to 12 months and stuff like that. So this time I'll be looking kind of from month to month and seeing, once the balance zeroes out, what I can do.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome. It's very cool.
Inspiring.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I know that it sounds like I talked about some pretty grim things there, but it is the background that inspired this book.
Well, it's a very big and important issue, especially in Canada. So
for sure, I just mentioned too, while I was there, they were educating me, and they're like, "Did you know that May 5th is the day for missing and murdered Indigenous women, and that we had a parade and we all wore red and everything?" And I was like, "Oh no, I didn't know that." Mm-hmm. I live about an hour away, and it just hadn't percolated through to me.
No, I don't think we hear enough about it.
Right, I think that within the community they're aware. Mm-hmm. But the rest of us, even if we want to know about it, unless we seek it out, we don't know. I was going to say that actually, so Madeline Peters, who is one of the outreach workers from the Akwesasne Family Wellness Program, is also coming on November 12th to the Cornwall Public Library. So I'm going to have the police officer, Scott Coulter, and Madeline Peters. So we're going to have a whole group there. So I feel like if nothing else, we're getting more voices out. We're completing the circle. Oh, sorry, that's my dog. She approves. She's like, complete that circle. Come on.
So we were saying before we hit record, Steph and I think that people generally have a fascination with medical procedures and life as a doctor. Do you find that you hear that from readers? Are they curious about what happened?
Well, it really depends who the reader is, right? So if they're fellow doctors, they're happy to see themselves represented. And they're usually like, oh my God, that brings me right back to residency. And if they're not, then they say, wow, I didn't know that, and I learned something new. And of course, I'll usually slide some cool medical fact in or something like that. So even if you're in the field, like there should be something surprising in it for you, because it's a hidden world, right? Like I've heard police officers say this too, that you feel like people who aren't in it don't understand you and are quick to criticize. So, I Googled doctors in the news, and it was just a lot of sexual abuse allegations or things like that. They were very negative. The ordinary stories don't get heard, and even if somebody thinks, oh, I'm really grateful that doctor detected my cancer or something like that, they might tell a few friends or anything, but it doesn't always have the same power as seeing these repeated
story, I guess.
Yeah, someone else telling the tale. So I'm glad to pull back the curtain for people and show us really as human beings. Hope is more superhuman than most, but she's still she's still real. She gets tired. She flirts with a guy that she shouldn't. She does lots of stuff, and so people are like, oh, they're like, they often tell me they're happy that it's funny. They're like, I can't believe I was laughing so hard. She doesn't know everything. And I'm like, yeah, no kidding. But for them, it's surprising that she will not know everything and that she'll say that she doesn't know everything.
Do you have to stop doing that after residency, though?
You have to stop doing that after residency.
You're always learning, right, as a doctor?
Yeah, I mean, obviously you have to instill confidence in people, so you don't want to just be like, ooh, I don't know, let me ask my supervisor. But, I'd be like, okay, I'm going to check into that. Sometimes people come in with, for example, extremely obscure genetic diseases or something like that, and will say to me that I'm one of only, this is one of only 2 cases in the world. Like once in a while it happens, even in a rural hospital. And I'll be like, interesting, I'm going to look that up. But I need to, how can I help you today? What is the specific thing today? And then I'll see how that interacts with this condition. Also, being an emergency doctor, like I've said before, that it's like doing 10 to 14 hours of improv. So people throw things at me, and I'm like, interesting. Okay, I'm going to deal with it this way. Because in general, I try to emphasize for emergency medicine, I'm sure you've heard of ABC. So we try to have algorithms to approach. And I tell people, one of the main things is don't be scared. So if you lose your nerve, you shouldn't be an emergency doctor. You should choose a different field because it's too brutal and it's too surprising. You should just have the basic confidence, okay, I'm going to try and handle this the best I can and know that there are other people that I can call on if I need help. Then just step into that space.
Do you have any tips for someone who wants to write maybe characters in a hospital and they want to write about a doctor, any way that they can make their novel more accurate?
Research.
Yeah.
That's always the answer. So DP Lyle is really great about answering medical questions. So DP, and then his last name is Lyle. And you just have to go on his website and ask and submit a form, absolving him of any problem. And then you can submit your question. And I did it myself when I wanted to ask about a poisoning and what he thought was realistic or not. So don't be shy about it. There was also a good group called Crime Scene Writers on Yahoo, but because Yahoo was just taken apart, I'm not sure what's happened to them. And in fact, I tried to find them and they're not there anymore. And I asked on a mystery group and they said when they move off, they're kind of deleted off of Yahoo. So if anyone wants to chime in and say what's happened to them, they were really great because they were, forensics, other police, I think firefighters were on there, pathologists, everybody would just answer your questions about crime scenes so you could try and be more accurate. And there are a few of us also who do workshops. I've been asked to do workshops on accuracy in medicine, and Leslie Donaldson is a nurse who does workshops as well. So the information is out there.
Can you, I don't know if you can do this without giving away anything confidential, can you tell us any crazy ER stories or interesting ER stories?
Yeah, we're always supposed to change the details.
Yes.
So when I write for the Medical Post, I just try and change identifying characteristics. But once they asked me that on a TV show and I just blanked out.
Oh, yeah.
Which was never a good thing to do. But at that time, what I remembered was, it was just sort of funny, one of the emergency doctors, I was finishing my shift and she was doing the night, and then I was coming back in the morning. So when I came back in the morning, I was like, how was it? And she was like, I delivered a baby. And I'm like, really? And she's like, yes. And it was one of those classic things, someone who said, who was just, I'm in pain, freaking out. And then the doctor reached over and was like, that's an arm.
Oh my God.
And delivered the baby, which I guess if you watch TV and stuff, it doesn't seem that surprising, but for a lot of it, it's been years since we delivered a baby. And so you really don't want to be stuck in this situation. And sometimes the family members are really like screaming and getting in the way when you're trying to do things. And I did post a story in the Medical Post about an infant who was acting very strange and I thought was intoxicated. Oh. And so we were trying to run the tox screen and we couldn't get a urine sample. And that was going on. And finally it came back positive for marijuana.
Oh, wow.
And it was that same poor night doctor who, like what we call the worst call karma, like she always attracts the worst cases, who finally got the urine back because I had finished, and she was the one who got it, and one of the family members was extremely abrasive about it and blamed it on somebody else giving it to the child and all this stuff. But when I posted that, someone else posted and said, "Oh yeah, I had a case of a 3-year-old on cocaine."
Oh my God.
I guess it makes sense that there are a lot of harrowing things happening in India.
A lot of heroin?
Yeah, harrowing.
Oh, harrowing. Oh, okay. I don't know. Let's just go through all the drugs. Heroin's not that popular, but okay.
Yeah, I can see where that's been wrong.
I mean, of course, people have tons of stories, and people always laugh about all of this stuff stuck in people's bums. And I don't have a lot of those stories. And in fact, in my collection, 50 Shades of Grey's Anatomy, I did a piece on rectal foreign bodies, and I was like, but I don't get them. And then, of course, like, within a month of that book going live, like, I got another case of it, and I was like, oh no. I tried to give it to the surgeon, and he was like, no, you try first. And the respiratory therapist who was on, and they were telling the story, because of course people always tell the story, she was like, oh no, Melissa got that case, but she was just saying she never gets those cases. So all around, we had a good laugh. I don't know why they're inherently funny, but they kind of are.
Well, it's kind of like an interesting blend. You have like dark themes, I guess we'll say, probably in your books as too, but it's also humorous. So like, do you find it hard to balance both when you're writing a novel, or since it's your daily life, it just kind of comes naturally?
I think my natural tendency is to make jokes anyway. Mm-hmm. So whether people get them or not is the question, I guess, and you do have to be careful who you tell. I remember I was on Fresh Air on CBC, and the host, Mary Ito, was like, your book is very snarky. You use a lot of humor, but she's snarky. And I was like, sure. And they always comment on the black humor of medicine and that sort of thing. But if you didn't laugh, you would burn out and get depressed and everything like that. So I think I already had that natural tendency. My brother and I are very cheery people. I'm not sure why. I think genetics and, good family and stuff like that. So in my books, I do tend to have the two going all the time. And I have had people say, like for Stockholm Syndrome, for example, she's in a hostage taking. Why is she making these jokes? Again, just for survival. Mm-hmm. And because they're funny.
Yeah.
Yeah, like, I mean, if I do a 15-hour night shift in general, even without the murder that she's facing, like, I feel pretty terrible. Like, I remember looking at the clock and being like, okay, it's midnight. I've been working for 6 hours, and I have another 8 to go.
Whew, that's a lot.
So you just feel like, and then always like 3, 2, 3, like, I not 2 a.m. not that bad, but 3, 4 a.m. I just feel like nobody's awake. I'm alone. This is horrible. And then by like 4 or 5, you're just like, it's a more normal time. People are starting to get up. It's not that bad, and you feel like you're going to turn the corner. But otherwise, night shifts are absolutely brutal.
Do you notice any big inaccuracies or common misconceptions that people either portray in television shows like Grey's Anatomy or people get from watching those?
So I actually crowdsourced my Medical Errors 101 talk, and I surveyed, like, we have a group that has thousands of Canadian physicians, and I'm just like, what bugs you the most? What really gets you going about these like books or TV? And it was really TV that made them the most angry. And a few of them were, like, one of the things I mentioned is that people have unrealistic expectation for codes. They think that if somebody comes in blue, no heartbeat, we're going to get them back. maybe by slapping them on the face and saying, "Stay with me." But they're going to survive. But the reality is, a lot of them will not. It's a bad situation to be in when you're not breathing and you don't have a heartbeat. But people think like, oh, but I see this all the time. But they've seen fake codes all the time. So that sets up unrealistic expectations. And then there are another thing that kept coming up was that they said, don't shock asystole. So the shows love showing a flat line, which is just a straight line. There's no beep and there's no wave that goes every time that there's a heartbeat. And then they apply electricity to get it back. But we apply electricity for specific arrhythmias, but not if it's a flat line. If there's a flat line and there's no heartbeat and you can't detect anything, we're not going to give you electricity because that's not going to restart your heart. We use medication.
That seems like a basic thing that they should be able to get right.
Yeah, I was gonna be like, that's all I've seen on TV.
Yeah, apparently, and so I haven't gone through it, but especially the anesthesia people and everything, we're just maddened because they'll put stuff up on the monitors that has no correlation to the actual person in the bed. So, like, the person will, like, they'll even make ventilator noises when the person is talking. Like, they just have no idea what is supposed to correspond to what, and then they put it up and they think it looks dramatic, so that's great. And then another beef was that somebody's been shot and they're dying, and then you take the bullet out and they're okay. And then you put it in a bowl, ping, and then the person sits up practically and then they're all better. Whereas in fact, the problem is all the tissue damage that you've had from the bullet. It's not the bullet itself. People run around with bullets in them all the time. Like, they live with bullets inside themselves all the time, but it's because, they didn't have any important end organ damage.
There's a lot wrong out there.
Yeah, there's so much wrong, but it is funny in a way, and you can correct it. But so a lot of us will not watch medical stuff to relax.
Yeah.
Because it's A, too much like work, and B, like, look at all the mistakes in it. But they say that, like, one of them's like, my husband's a lawyer and he can't watch any of the law shows, so it's an occupational hazard.
Yeah, every time I see something on publishing, I'm like, that's not how that works.
That's true. Yeah, all the bestsellers and everything, I'm sure. So maybe just TV in general.
True.
They got to get better.
Yeah.
Just to recap for anyone listening, you've got your Kobo originals coming out November 5th. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
And your next novel is...
Yeah, so Graveyard Shift is coming out November 1st.
Okay, perfect. So very soon. Awesome. We will include the links to that when we post this. And are you working on anything else right now? I realize you have a lot on your plate.
Yeah, I am. But one of the things was I wanted to write about hope in Egypt. So I have put it aside just at the moment because I have a few projects on the go. But I thought it'd be great if her next adventure was in Egypt. Because for me, that was a really different place to go. I'm not one of the people who said, well, I always dreamed of going to the pyramids and I really wanted to learn. For me, I went there and I was like, I can't believe there's such an ancient civilization and I have so little knowledge of it. I knew a few things, like I knew a bit about mummies and that the pharaohs were brothers and sisters who would marry each other and that sort of thing. But I didn't know very much about the culture and the history and the meaning. I was in the Valley of Kings and Queens looking at the tombs and looking at the hieroglyphics and thinking, I wish I understood what this meant.
Mm-hmm.
It was so meaningful to them and it's impenetrable to me. So coming back now and actually listening to podcasts as well as reading and everything about Egypt, like it's so interesting. I'm like, there's a whole other world that I don't know very much about history and world civilization and everything. I would like to. So that's exciting.
That's cool.
Yeah. And I guess you've kind of answered this question, but we always like to ask, what have you been loving lately? Listening to, watching, reading?
This is a podcast, so I'm going to name some of the podcasts that I listen to. So actually this one is brutal, but right now I'm listening to, what's it called? I'll have to bring up my phone. But it's about Canadian crime. So that is Canadian True Crime, Robert Pickton. Mm-hmm. I know, that one, I didn't download it because I was just like, I don't think I can stomach that. That's so horrible. But luckily, by part 3, they promised me that this is the one where he finally gets caught. So, and I did, and it's so frustrating too to listen to. For example, one of the investigators was on the cutting edge, doing like geographical forensic investigations, like just saying, okay, these are where the murders were. I think that the killer might be located here based on geography and that sort of thing. And everybody ignored him. They're like, oh, what is that? You know, it was a new technique and they didn't want to hear about it. And even though around the world people were excited, within the Vancouver Police Department, they were shutting him out. So I'm listening to that. I have the History of Egypt podcast, unsurprisingly. And I'm also listening to podcasts on the Fringe Festival because this past June I turned the Unfeeling Doctor book into a Fringe show called I Am the Most Unfeeling Doctor in the World and won Best of Fest in Ottawa.
Wow.
I've applied to Edmonton and I'd like to go to Winnipeg, which are the two big Fringe destinations. And I'll see if I can take that on the road.
Wow.
Very
I can't
cool.
believe how many things you've got going on at once.
Well, I do like to do different things, and it is fun. And again, like indie publishing, Fringe means that you can produce it, you choose the script, and in fact, there aren't any jurors or editors or anything like that. As long as you get randomly chosen to perform, you get to go up there and do your thing.
Yeah, I grew up in Edinburgh, so the Edinburgh Fringe is huge. So I saw a lot of Fringe shows when I was younger.
I would like to go to Edinburgh, but people lose a lot of money there.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to educate myself.
I've actually listened to quite a lot of podcasts with comedians and other performers talking about Edinburgh, and from their perspective, it sounds sort of awful. Like just 3 weeks of losing money, and because there's so many shows at once. And
yeah, like thousands of shows, and you're lucky to get 7 people, and one person described it as like it's just like setting money on fire.
Oh, wow.
It probably is, but it is also like I don't know what performing is like, but if you have the opportunity to go to Edinburgh Fringe, it's extremely cool. There's a lot going on. There's a lot to see. There's a lot of people. But yes, I imagine that it is also quite a lot like setting money on fire.
Well, that's it. So that's the thing that artistically, I would just love to go there and meet other artists and just sort of drink it all in, because you have, some of the world's best performers here, right? Mm-hmm. And word and dance and drama and comedy and everything like that, like all mixed together. So it's really an amazing thing. So, I may choose to go at some point, whether it's as a performer or as a punter. Mm-hmm. But I think like that has made it onto my to-do list.
It's not really like anything else I've seen. The Fringe in Edinburgh, it's so big. It just takes over the city for 3 weeks.
I know, yeah. I like they had told me the stats, now I've forgotten them, but it was like 12 or 20,000 people coming in, and it was like normally it's a really tiny place, so there's this huge infiltration of new people. And for me, also, I was just like listening attentively as they were describing the weather and how it can go from sunny to rainy.
It rains all the time in August. It is not that sunny. It will be cold.
Right. So then I was like, oh no. I was like, okay, because they were like umbrella and raincoat at all times. And I'm like, oh, and I'm a person who's cold all the time. So I'm like, I would have to bring extra fleece. Right. So
because you think, oh, I'm going somewhere in August, it will be fine. And it can be like, it's never going to be freezing, but it can be like 5-6 degrees easily and raining. But it can also
you know what? I've run into that too. Just by the way, if anyone is, for FYI, Oregon and San Francisco have also killed me because I've been like, oh, I'm going to California. Oh, the West Coast is so nice. No, it's not. Bring more layers than you think you're going to need because it's cold out there.
I would not expect that at all.
Yeah, I had to buy a jacket when I was in Oregon on the coast. Portland is okay. But the coast is all like rainy and cold. So, and killer waves too. You don't want to get swept into the sea. Seriously.
Wow.
Because by the way, the people I mentioned earlier, I think Christine Catherine Rush and Dean Wesley Smith, anyway, I'd met them through Writers of the Future. They had a bunch of workshops on the Oregon coast, so that's how I know. And they would always caution us not to get swept away into the ocean.
Seems like a dangerous situation.
It's a likely hazard. Like, how often are people close enough to get swept?
Probably a lot if they're telling people.
Yeah.
Well, you know what? It's because the ocean is still beautiful, and once in a while you can even find glass floats and stuff that wash up on the shore because Japanese fishermen used to use glass to hold down their nets. So people will always be on the shores. And they have these enormous logs on the shore too, like trees that you could not put your arms around, sort of thing. So the very first night we got there, you know, my friend and I are walking down, and I'm like, can you sit on that log and I'll take a picture of you? She's like, sure. Then we go to orientation. They're like, never sit on those logs. A sneaker wave can come up and pull that log away and sweep you out to sea. And I was like, oh my gosh, I just put Leslie's life in danger and I didn't even know. So there's another public service message for you.
Don't sit on logs.
Don't sit on logs on the Oregon coast.
And always bring a coat.
And always bring a coat. Yes, we're good. We're covered. Yeah. So I talked to you medical errors and how to save yourself from the Pacific Ocean.
We've learned a lot today.
I think so.
Yeah, thank you so much, Melissa, for joining us today.
Okay, awesome. So Kobo has kindly made a code that you can try Graveyard Shift 100% for free, the ebook. Then the code is Graveyard 100. So GRAVEYARD 100, all one word. And put that in your promo code box and you should be good.
You'll get it for free.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Steph and Joni.
Thank you for listening to the Kobo Writing Life podcast. If you enjoyed the sample of the audiobook Code Blues, you can get it on kobo.com right now. And if you're interested in purchasing her title Graveyard Shift, we will have a link to that on our blog for you to take a look at as well. And if you're interested in growing your Kobo sales, visit kobowritinglife.com. This episode was produced by Stephanie McGrath and Joni DePlacido. This episode was edited by Kelly Robotham. Music was provided by Tearjerker, and special thanks to Melissa Yee for being a guest on our episode.
If you're ready to start your self-publishing journey today, sign up for free at kobo.com/writinglife. Until next time, happy writing!